have to continuously improve and hone your message because it's changing all the time. And in order to service the sales team, the marketing team has to continually improve and upgrade that message. And that communication has to go in both directions every time, every week.
Welcome to our latest episode of the B2B Sales Trends Podcast, my lovely people. The show that brings you hacks, tips, thought leadership to the topic of B2B selling. My name is Kendlbacher, and today's episode is all about how do we understand the buying process, especially in healthcare, and how do we build relationships at every level to win bigger and better deals. Intriguing title for today. Our expert for the session is Stacy Faught. Stacy is the National Director of Sales and Marketing at Beckman Coulter. Welcome to the B2B Sales Trends Podcast, Stacy.
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Harry. Nice to be here.
Stacy, give us a bit of an intro about yourself, your role, and your background. That will be fab.
Yeah, so I've been in the medical healthcare industry for most of my career, well over 20 years now, various commercial roles, both in marketing and sales. I've been here within the Danaher umbrella for over 2 years now, and our product group is helping commercialize artificial intelligence within our hospital partners, particularly in the triage emergency department space, and also in the intensive care space as well, utilizing artificial intelligence to help manage patient risk.
Interesting. Thank you for that intro. Stacy, let's talk a little bit about complexity of healthcare buying. You know, hospital buying has always been, layered, but with the rise of AI in healthcare, we're seeing new levels of complexity, right? What stands out to you about how the buying process in hospitals has changed and why it is such a challenge nowadays for seller to navigate?
Yeah, the space has definitely changed a lot, even in the last year or two. The appearance of AI technologies has healthcare executives, I think, both excited but also cautious at the same time. We've heard a lot of the stories, in the media about AI hallucinations and things like that. And, anytime there's a new technology, I think our hospital partners have to really, be cautious about how they adopt a new technology. Because patient safety, of course, is first, and foremost in their minds and on all of our minds. And so with that, hospitals have had to figure out how to navigate this new environment, how to navigate these new technologies. While they are healthcare and medical experts, they are not IT and software and most importantly, AI experts. And so they are now forming AI committees and AI groups within the hospitals. And it is adding another layer and another level of complexity to the buying process within hospitals. We've seen that trend over the last decade or so of hospitals. It used to be, 90s and 2000s, most departments had their own operating budget and they made their own decisions fairly independently. But that's become a lot more centralized, and purchasing decisions are made very centrally now. And now even more so with AI technologies in particular, you have, your value add committees and you have your new product introduction committees, but then you have another layer on top of that of an AI committee who then vets all of the AI projects, not only for, an ROI benefit, but also for, there's a risk element of it. And then there's an overall, can we manage this? Is this something that the hospital wants to manage from that element too? So there is a definite increase in the complexity of the buying process because you have yet another group, another stakeholder in the process that you have to navigate through. And many times those committees are not necessarily accessible right away. Usually they're an internal committee. And so the process will be is that you are communicating with your customer, but they're going through this process themselves. So our challenge in industry is to educate our customer to the point where they can properly communicate the value of the product to these committees for us. And that is an incredible challenge sometimes.
Does that impact the sales cycle and the length of it?
It does, and it's the unfortunate reality of it where, you're looking at sales cycles that can go in excess of a year now. Just because the fact that you are adding something to the operating budget of the hospital, and that usually has to go through a budget cycle. So depending on where you land and where the hospital budget cycle is, when you start communicating with them, you will have to go through that process because they're not going to invest the time and the resources in implementing something only to realize they don't have budget for it in the following year. So they want to make sure that it's sustainable year over year before they start investing resources on their end for it. So you do have a very long sales cycle because of this.
Yeah. And of course, that's a lot of pressures on sellers, right? And, we hear often that the sellers are caught in the middle in a way. Leadership wants orders, they want POs, but hospitals are just moving slowly, as just, you have described. How do great sellers, in your opinion, balance that pressure between the patience and the persistence it takes to see these, large deals through?
It's a very delicate act, Harry. I'll tell you, because you want to stay at the front of mind of your customer, but you certainly don't want to be a pest. You want to be a partner to them, and it's a long process for them too. And I think that's really where a good seller stands out, is that they have compassion and empathy for their customer, and they really consider that person a partner to them. And they're really trying to help them navigate the process and help them deal with probably the internal frustration that they have of what's a long process. Because if you put yourself in your customer's position, they're like, yeah, this is a really great technology and it's going to help us. Mm-hmm. And they walk back into that department every single day and they see the same problem that this software will help them fix. And they're aggravated by the fact that they have to continue to deal with this problem. And so if you have compassion, you really put yourself in your customer's position, then it can help you. The last thing that person wants at that point is to have a salesperson hassling them every day for a PO. So how do you walk that line, as a salesperson? And then, on the other hand, my team and my leadership is telling me, hey, where are the POs? You've been talking to this hospital for how long? Where's the PO at? When are we going to get a PO from them? And so, there's, as you said, you are oftentimes caught in the middle here because there's a lot going on and it's a long process. And a lot of companies are not used to the long process, of these POs taking as long as they do. So it's definitely a balancing act. And I think really it's about communication and about empathy and compassion for your customer and for everybody along the line.
We talked in our pre-call to this recording, we talked a little bit, building connections at multiple level is really key. And you brought something up that I noted down is the zipper versus the button relationships. Share with us what you mean by that, and what can our audience learn from that?
Yeah, a really wonderful mentor of mine years ago introduced me to this concept, and Angus, if you're out there listening, thank you. Always treasured your mentorship to me. And the compared relationships that our sellers have with our hospital partners to buttons versus zippers, and what that means is that a button relationship is a single point. Right. And it's a single point of failure. And as we know, some buttons work very hard, especially after a Thanksgiving dinner. And what that means essentially is that you have a single point of contact with the customer, whether it's the biomedical engineering director, or whether it's a critical care director, or whatever that might be. And it's the only person that in that hospital. And things happen, especially, as we were talking with a long sales cycle. People leave their jobs, they get promoted, they lose interest, whatever it might be, things happen. And if you have only that single point of contact and that single relationship, your entire deal is at risk over that single point of contact, versus what we call a zipper relationship means that you have multiple relationships at multiple levels in the organization. So all the way up and all the way down the organization, from the techs and the nurses all the way up to the C-level, you've developed relationships within the hospital, and you've developed excitement around your brand and around your product. And what that means is that now you've got support all up and down vertically in the organization for what you're doing. And if there's a single point failure within that organization, if somebody leaves their job or someone loses interest, whatever it might be, you still have all those other contact points that you can rely on to keep that deal going. And that's really important, Harry, as you mentioned before, with these long sales cycles, is that you will lose momentum at times. You will have frustration. People will go on vacation. They'll change jobs. Things happen. But if you have a zipper relationship, if you have multi-level engagements all across the organization, you can keep that deal moving. And the next person that comes in and fills that role, they're going to hear support all from above them and from below them. And they're going to realize that this is a project that's going to have to be continued. And then they're going to see it through as well.
Love that. Love that concept. Zipper relationships, my lovely people. That's what you're supposed to create at every level within your buying organization and within your customer organization. And of course, the challenge is, what are each one of those relationships needs? What are the outcomes that you can help them create and so forth? And then apply that to every part of your zipper. I love that. Great. Stacy, in many cases, the buying process changes throughout the sales cycle. New committees are coming in, decision makers shift. What practical advice do you have for sellers on how to stay agile and avoid getting sort of blindsided by these many changes that continue to happen? How do you have your team stay focused?
It is a challenge, like you said, because the biggest struggle within all of this, especially when you're selling a disruptive product, something new like artificial intelligence, you're going to have slow adoption. You're going to have roadblocks. You're going to have people that come in that are skeptical, people that don't want change. It's going to happen. You're going to have a new committee that gets thrown in the buying process, and suddenly the deal screeches to a halt. There's a lot of frustration there. There's and this kind of leads into, I think, the next question a little bit. There's a term that was coined by I think it was the Army War College back at the end of the Cold War, called VUCA. And it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I always think about, when I'm interviewing folks and when I'm coaching my team, about VUCA tolerance, right? And the idea being that, we are in an uncertain selling environment, right? There is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of complexity. There is a lot of ambiguity. You can't just write a playbook and then execute it time after time after time, right? This isn't your typical traditional, sales, type of role. And if you think it's going to be that, then you should probably do something different, right? You have to be comfortable with the uncertainty, and you have to be comfortable with that, and know that you're going to hit these roadblocks, you're going to hit speed bumps. But if you are persistent and you build relationships at multiple levels, if you tailor your message to the customer, if you're talking to a C-level person the way that in giving them the message that they need to hear, if you're talking to a nurse and giving the message that they need to hear, you're going to be successful. It's a matter of time. But sometimes these deals take a long time to close. I like to say that, close lost is never really close lost. I think 40% of my won deals as an individual contributor were close lost deals. You have to stick with it, and you have to be persistent. And that's oftentimes very difficult, even for salespeople. And a good salesperson is persistent anyway. But I think even more so with this type of environment, with new technologies, you have to be very persistent and very comfortable with the fact that there is no defined process. You have to communicate a lot. One thing that I have my team do is we have a very, I won't say strict, that's not the right word to use, but a consistent policy of not only having pre-call planning, but having a post-call debrief on every single sales call. Because you have to keep communicating about these things, and you have to have a very tight relationship with the marketing team about what's going well and what's not going well. The integration has to be super, super tight so that we can continue to hone that message. It can't be an over the wall, marketing, here's your material, train the sales team and then walk away. You have to continuously improve and hone your message because it's changing all the time. And in order to service the sales team, the marketing team has to continually improve and upgrade that message. And that communication has to go in both directions every time, every week. We talk about this stuff. And I think that's what makes a successful team.
Love that. Love it. The last question on every podcast, and we're almost at the end of that super insightful session today. Tell me about what you think, and a couple of things you've obviously touched on already, but summarize it up for me. What are, in your opinion, the top 3 qualities of elite sales people in nowadays environment? What are those top 3 qualities that they need to possess to be really elite?
I know it's a bit cliche because everybody gets trained on this, but you have to really be good at value selling. And what that means is that you really have to listen. Your first part of your conversation with the customer has to be talking to them, understanding what their perspective on their problems are. And yes, you hear the same thing from lots of people every day. Hey, how's it going? How's it going in your emergency department? Do you have waiting? You're going to hear the same answers, but you can't just assume that you know the answers already because that particular customer hasn't told you, right? You haven't made the problem real for them, and so listening is number 1. So the ability to listen and to really hear your customer and to be patient and not just skip to the end, because we all want to just say, well, hey, I've got this great thing that can help you. Now, this is their first time hearing it. You always have to be patient and remember that you've got to walk them through that process and really, weave that story for them, and weave that story in such a way that, you are you have to remember that you are the guide. You're guiding them to the solution. They are the hero. You are the guide, and listen and weave that story well. And that's, I think, the second quality that I think to me makes a very good salesperson is the ability to really be a good storyteller. It's not just about spitting out a bunch of features and, knowing when to apply pressure for a sale. Yes, these are all important qualities as well. However, really connecting the customer concerns and the pain points, the critical thing that keeps them up at night, and connecting that with how your product can help them sleep better at night. That is really where you start creating that emotional connection. And that's when you can really land a complicated deal, is when you start creating an emotional connection within your customer to your product. When they get off that call, or when you walk out of that room and they walk out of that room, they say, they feel very deeply now that they absolutely have to have this. This is going to improve their quality of care to their patients. They have to have this. That's when you've won as a salesperson. So I think those are some of the really critical qualities, along with what I mentioned before, just the ability to navigate a very uncertain and ambiguous sales cycle with the way things are today, and not getting disappointed or distracted or let down by yet another committee got thrown in the process. It's easy to do, but that's also my job. My job is to continue lifting my team up and coaching them and making sure that they're ready to attack the next day to the best of their ability. But those are the 3 qualities I think that really separate out the really terrific salespeople.
Love it. Well, lovely people, you heard it from Stacy. What wonderful insights. Thank you. We really appreciate your input. I know our listeners are very, very much like and appreciate your insights and thought leadership. Thank you, Stacy.
Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it.
2 calls to action, my lovely people. Go to the B2B Sales Trends.com site, subscribe, and share this or other episodes with people you think this would be applicable to. Go to Global Performance Group. com if you want to find out how to increase win rates, reduce your sales cycles, and protect margins throughout the process. Until the next episode, look after yourself, your loved ones, and of course, your B2B customer. Bye-bye.